The Puck Portfolio with Andy McNeil.
Hey, welcome to the Puck Portfolio. It is Tuesday, January 28th. We are live here on the Daily Faceoff or DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel. I'm Andy McNeil, and with me, as always, Nick Martin from DFO. Nick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Yeah, today going to see the Caps Flames game, so I'm always pumped up about that.
Nice. Hopefully Ovi will do a little something for you. Unlike when I went to see him play in the Oilers game last week. So I'll be.
Yeah, I did look into it because it had felt like I've seen pretty good Caps games, and he's got 5 goals in the last 5 games here, and they are 4-1. So it felt like I'd seen games that I liked in my head, and that's definitely true.
Right on. Yeah, no, he. Hopefully he'll light the lamp for you and an inch closer to Gretzky's all-time goal scoring record. Would love to see him do that this season. Seems unlikely, like we talked about last week, but hey, a few multi-goal games, you never know. Might get closer than we thought. But yeah, some big stories coming out of the NHL here. Kirill Kaprizov going to have surgery, or maybe he's already had surgery. And he's going to be out week to week. Looks like he'll be out for at least a month. That's a big blow to the Minnesota Wild, who just got him back into the lineup. And more big news coming out of the NHL. Alex Pietrangelo backing out of his spot on Team Canada for the Four Nations Cup. Let's start with the Pietrangelo news here. He said he wants to, take care of an ailment that he's been dealing with, but then went on to play 24 minutes against the Florida Panthers. So he's probably not too unhealthy right now. But do you think we'll see any more players back out of this Four Nations Cup here, Nick?
Yeah, I have a feeling he won't be the only one. And honestly, I respect it. I'm not trying to, that I think this tournament is a little less of a gimmick than maybe other people think. I am excited about it. Yeah. But I also think if you're playing on a cup contender, and Pietrangelo's been through a lot of injuries, and I fully think it's reasonable. And, part of him probably realizes that there's guys that are arguably right at his level that are going to get to fill those spots. So I think he can probably honestly say that he doesn't feel like he's, ruining Canada's chances or anything. And I mean, players play through nagging injuries all the time. I think he's done it personally a lot. So yeah, I didn't really have any issue with it. I thought it was a pretty reasonable move to pull.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you've been called by your country to represent them in the Olympics, right? It is essentially a gimmick tournament. We're all excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, it's not going to hold the same weight with the players that an Olympic team would. So yeah, totally understandable, and I don't think he'll necessarily be the last one to pull out. But yeah, big slate today. 8 games in the NHL for this Tuesday. Let's start with the Boston Bruins and the Buffalo Sabres. Curious where the odds are on this one now. Boston has come down a bit. They were at minus 115, now minus 106, minus 104 for the Buffalo Sabres. So a virtual coin flip here between these two Atlantic Division rivals. The Bruins are entering this game following a 2-day break. So are the Sabres. So both teams will be well rested heading into this one. Boston beat Buffalo 3-1 back on December 21st. And they also, in their last game, beat the new look Colorado Avalanche by a score of 3-1 at home, thanks to stellar performance from Jeremy Swayman. Not a great performance from the Bruins as a team. Boston registered just 14 shots in the game. I think they only had 8 shots for the first 2 periods, but Swayman was really good, and that gave the Bruins a chance to have a big third period. Morgan Geekie delivering his second multi-goal performance of the season, extending his goal scoring streak to 3 games. He's been red hot, 6 goals in his last 7 games, showing a lot of chemistry with star David Pasternak. He's just 2 goals shy of matching his career high of 17, which took him 76 games to set last season. So he is looking like he's going to blow that career high out of the water. But nobody's hotter right now than David Pasternak. He got points in 7 straight games, including multi-points in 6 of those games. Since December 20th, he leads the league in scoring with 12 goals and 12 assists in his last 15 games, twice as many points as Boston's next best player, which is Geeky. So that's kind of the problem right now. Despite really strong goaltending from Jeremy Swayman, the Bruins aren't necessarily carrying the weight offensively, but Pasternak certainly is. But you have to look at Boston's power play too. Just since December 27th, 6-7-2. That's the Bruins' record, and their power play has been a big reason why they aren't winning as many games as they maybe should have. 12.5% over that stretch. Not very good. How do you see this matchup? I've got a couple of picks here that I like, but I'm just wanting to know if you see anything that you like in this matchup, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure to a ton of people, the Bruins look to be like not getting much credit. And I almost kind of feel that way. I bet against the Bruins in the Senators game and the Avs game, and I feel pretty hard done by not to get either one of those
Yeah.
results because I don't think they were the better team probably in either game.
No.
But I mean, I still feel like it has to be Bruins or pass. Looking at what the Sabres have done, even coming from someone who probably thinks. I mean, you look at the Bruins last week; they got smoked by the Devils and then had those 2 lucky wins. So I think your angle's good. I think that's kind of the way to play the Bruins here. I feel like they're really not getting much else offensively. Pasternak's been incredible for the last month here. Gets a pretty good spot to keep it going versus Buffalo. So I like that look. I don't know if you saw if Charlie McAvoy is going to play or not. I was kind of
No, they're
assuming
not
he
going on the
wasn't.
trip. Him and Lindholm both practice in regular jerseys yesterday, but they are not traveling with Boston to Buffalo. Just a 1-game road trip. So I would imagine
Right.
they'll
That
be
makes sense
back in the
looking at the
lineup
line.
soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like obviously, given that this price hasn't widened, that's not overly surprising. But yeah, I didn't have too much other than that. Just kind of trying to explain a little bit where I think odds makers have coming from. We've talked about how the Sabres haven't been probably quite as pathetic as their
No.
record suggests. But at some point, I think you got to probably just put a little bit of onus about the actual results. And Buffalo has had a really hard time closing out games and actually, turning their play into wins. So I definitely
Yeah.
wouldn't touch them at this price.
Yeah, so the Sabres, they're coming back from a 4-game road trip to play a 4-game homestand. They went 1-3 on the trip in the Western Conference. They are 9-12-3 at home this season. They've won 3 of their last 5 home games, but they've only managed 4 home victories in 15 home games since November 11th. The one thing that does kind of scare me as a Bruins fan here is that the Sabres have been pretty productive offensively since December 22nd. Only 2 teams have scored more goals per 60 minutes in all situations, and that's the Nashville Predators and the Edmonton Oilers. But still, their defensive issues are pretty glaring. Only 4 teams have allowed more goals per 60 over the same stretch. And they rank 22nd in shot attempts against and 26th in expected goals against at even strength over the last month, according to Evolving Hockey.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
you look at that road trip. They played all those games pretty well. They played the Flames really well. Only
played the
lost 2 or
Oilers
3
well
to the
too.
Oilers. Yeah, like I think 1 and 3 was pretty hard done by, but that's kind of been the whole season. So at this point, I feel like it's getting a little harder to kind of beat that positive regression drum.
Yeah, no finish, right? Like in the game versus Edmonton, they generated 41 shots against the Oilers, and they failed to score on I think 2 breakaways and a 2-on-1 late in the game. And good teams like Lindy Ruff said find a way to score some goals in those situations, and the Sabres couldn't get it done. But like you said, they've shown some ability to generate offense. They rank 4th in shots per 60 minutes since January 11th. They registered 34 shots against the Flames, 41 shots against the Oilers. I might have those flipped. I'm sorry, but yeah, one or the other. but
Yeah, I
but
think you're
yeah,
right. I
just
had
the
the Wolf
finish.
save prop in the Calgary game, which was one of the good takes because it was, I think, 2 periods it took to get there.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I mean, honestly, that could be an interesting look too if you're considering this game. Swayman's at 25.5. So
Oh,
I
okay.
would
Yeah.
definitely be leaning towards the over there.
Yeah, speaking of Swayman, so he stopped 27 of 28 shots against the Avs. Since December 11th, he ranks 6th in goals saved above expected. according to Evolving Hockey. So really good, starting to look like that game changer that everybody thought he was heading into the season. I think for the Sabres, they got to try to beat the Bruins with speed and skill here, because Boston's obviously struggled against teams like that. And Buffalo does have some of that. They just need to put it together and have some of those shots go in the back of the net this time around. But my two looks are on the Bruins side. First, I've got David Pasternak over 1.5 points, plus 155 at Sports Interaction. He hasn't scored in 3 games versus the Sabres, but he had scored in 7 of 9 meetings prior to that. He recorded 2 points in the last matchup on December 21st. And I think given his recent form, he has a stronger chance of another multi-point game than plus 155 odds suggest. So I'm going with Pasternak, 1 unit at plus 155 to go over 1.5 points. And I also like Mason Lohrey over 0.5 power play points. It's plus 475 at Sports Interaction, plus 500 at Bet365. The Bruins so the Bruins are actually the most penalized team in the league on a per game basis this season, but the Sabres are right there. And I think this is going to be a game where both teams will probably see some time on the man advantage. But also, aside from being on the top power play right now, Lohrey is, arguably Boston's top offensive defenseman. I mean, he leads the team or he's the top defensive scoring player on the team right now. And with McAvoy and Lindholm still out, he's going to have some opportunities to play in the offensive zone. So he's got 6 points in his last 8 games. 3 of those have come on the power play. So it's just a quarter unit bet for me, 0.25 units on Lohrey to go over 0.5 power play points at 5-1 odds. So I think that's a good look for this one, considering Buffalo isn't that great on the kill, and they've allowed a lot of penalties, or taken a lot of penalties per game. So those are my 2 bets for this one. You have something in the Carolina game, right, Nick?
Yeah, I do. And yeah, I love Lohrey, straight out of Louisiana. I think he is their best offensive defenseman. Not even just statistically. I thought he was going to be a little better in all areas of the game this year than he has been, but I still really like him. I think he's going to be a really good player. So
I think
I like that bet.
I think he's, doing all right. Like overall, I think, I think, I see a lot of people on Twitter and stuff criticize this defensive game, but I think he's a fine player. And I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be a really, really good, top pairing defenseman. So I'm excited about his
to these guys that actually try to make plays on the puck too.
Yeah.
Like it's, I think, kind of just a general thing where those guys get criticized probably more than they deserve. If they sat there and just chipped every puck out and tried to make the simple play every single time, you're probably hearing a little bit less criticism. But there's also a lot of times where he's driving play in the right direction and creating something because he actually tries to make plays on the puck. So I feel like he's kind of in that pool with Bouchard and all these other guys that kind of get bad when those incidents do go wrong.
For sure.
And yeah, to get into the Rangers game, I like Shesterkin to go over 26.5 saves.
Okay.
Hopefully the number hasn't moved much more. I was at minus 120 when I first wrote it up this morning, and I think there's still minus 130s out there. So I'd happily play that. We've all seen the way Carolina plays. They're perennially among the leaders in shots on goal. They're averaging 32 per 60 this month. The Rangers are averaging about 27.5 against this month. And I feel like there's just going to be a lot of game scripts here where Carolina pours it on, but Shesterkin keeps it close. He's been unreal lately, which has kind of fueled the Rangers turnaround. He's 6-1-1 his last 8, has a .930 save percentage. So I thought that was a little surprisingly low. I know shots are down a lot here, but I still not really seeing that looking at their recent averages. And I feel like with Carolina, we've seen for a long time that's the way they're going to play. And I think we've seen that matchup, or this matchup, play out that way a lot in their playoff series last year. We saw it a lot when these teams met. I think it was about exactly a month ago at this point. Carolina had 32 shots. Shesterkin had 30 saves. So I thought that number was a couple saves short, and think that that's a good bet there.
Yeah, I like it. And speaking of goaltenders, Freddie Anderson going to be back in the crease for his third game since returning from injury. He's won his last 5 in a row. His only loss this season. He's only played 6 games, but his only loss this season, coming way back on October 11th against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So he's going to make another start here, and that's good for the Hurricanes, because obviously that's a big reason why they have probably not reached their full potential this year. You know, they've had to ride Kochetkov pretty hard, and you know, rely on guys like Dustin Tokarski. So it's great to have him back for anybody that is looking to see Carolina, you know, finally get there this season. Obviously, they made that big trade last week to get Mikko Rantanen. I listened to Eric Tulsky talking about the trade on Jeff Merrick's show, The Sheet, yesterday actually, and he talked about hopefully getting Rantanen extended. I don't know. You know, if he goes to market, I think there's going to be some teams out there, the Blue Jackets, even the Flames, have a ton of cap space, and the bidding war. I think
crazy offers.
The bidding war is going to be pretty intense, I think, come the summer. And I'm not sure, you know, he's already won a Stanley Cup. If he wins another one, if Carolina does cash in on this trade and win a Stanley Cup, well, all he has to play for at that point is money. So, I mean, I don't know I think they're going to have a tough time extending him, but we'll see. What do you think of the trade, Nick? We didn't get to talk about this last week, really, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. Obviously, I think everybody thinks Carolina is the winner, but we'll see what the Avalanche can do here with that extra cap space that they freed up.
Yeah, and it's a good segue because my prop coming up is on Natchez, so that lets us get into that easily. But I agree. I think obviously anytime you're getting the best player in the trade, you've probably done pretty well, especially when you're in Carolina's situation. But I think the case for Colorado is a lot better than people are kind of crediting. Like you look at Natchez, he's not that far behind in production this year. He's been pretty solid all over the ice. He's driven his own line, which is honestly not really something you can say about Rantanen this year. Natchez had been playing excellent on a line with Kotkaniemi and Eric Robinson, and they were doing really good in terms of actual goals for and against. He was getting a ton of chances. So, yeah, we haven't seen it out of Natchez for as many years, but I do think there's, you know, a part of it you might be kind of paying Rantanen for what he did playing alongside McKinnon and Makar. I'm not really trying to say he's a merchant, but like I do think that his numbers probably were a little inflated just because of the roles he was in, and maybe Colorado kind of realized that, and their salary construction I don't think was really going to work well if they paid Rantanen 14.5 or whatever it ended up being. I don't think that was going to be such a good fit. They're still lacking some depth over there, so I obviously like it for Carolina. I think it gives them a better chance of winning the cup, but I kind of see it more from Colorado's perspective than I think a lot of other people seem to be. I think there's a chance that Natchez could just prove to be a true top liner that they're going to end up locking into play there for a lot less money. So
yeah, and he signed for another year after this at a really reasonable price too. So
yeah, so I think it's a good move for the Avs there. And Jack Drury is going to play on their team too. He hasn't been, you know, excellent this year, but he will consistently play steady minutes on their team too. So they did get, you know, a second piece that's useful. But yeah, I think there's a lot to like about Natchez there, and I think the first two games went reasonably well. He got in supposedly at like 5:30 in the morning for the Bruins game, and I thought he played pretty well. He got hung with a -3 rating in the end, which was kind of a good example of how dumb that stat can be, because the one was an empty netter, the one was that little gap behind the net. So I don't really think it was his fault. But you look at the way him and McKinnon and Duran have played so far, and they're really outplaying opponents, which is what you'd expect. They've generated over 100 shot attempts per 60. Natchez himself has 17 shot attempts in 2 games with Colorado, 5 shots on goal, which doesn't include the 3 posts he hit. Yeah. I also did think he had 3 shots versus Boston. I was pissed. I bet Natchez to go over 2.5 in that game. And there's one he tipped on goal that they recorded as a missed shot in his tip, which I can't really get. I was there, but I have thought that he's looked fine there, and as long as he stays on roles, I think his current shot prop of 2.5 at -110 isn't going to be around for long. And the other part of that is he was averaging only about 18 minutes in Carolina this year. We talked about how he wasn't even playing on the top line, and it's well known obviously Carolina likes to spread all those minutes around, which the Avs really don't. They're still extremely top heavy. So unless they kind of eventually swing to putting Natchez on his own line and hoping he can kind of drive a second unit, I think that number is just not going to be around much longer. He averaged over 22 minutes in the 2 games on the weekend, got a lot of chances at even strength and on the power play. So I think all of his props right now haven't necessarily been adjusted enough. I thought the shot prop was the one that kind of stuck out to me, where I just feel like 20 games from now, I'll be shocked if we're seeing -110. Like I said, unless he ends up kind of trying to drive his own second unit and they balance the minutes a little more. But as long as he's top line, top power play, I'll be pretty surprised if we're seeing -110. So yeah, I think that's a good bet in this game. I'm kind of trying to keep my eyes out for where his goal market opens as well. Most of the books don't have it out yet, but I feel like the better prices will probably end up being +260, which I think is a good bet. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like about Natchez right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's looked great. And like you said, 3 posts, so he probably should have a goal at this point. But I'm sure that'll come in bunches here once he gets it going with McKinnon. But the game I want to move on to is Winnipeg and Montreal. The Jets looking to win their 4th game in a row. This one has moved a bit since I wrote it up at dailyfaceoff.com. But I'm taking Winnipeg on the money line. Look. I've been a big fan of Montreal. They've won some really great bets for me over the last month, but there's no question that they're starting to slip here. And it's not just because they've lost 2 games in a row. It's the first time that's happened since they lost 9-2 to Pittsburgh and 4-2 to Winnipeg back in the middle of December, right before they went on that run, going 13-3-2, something like that. Since then, but yeah, they've really started to slip, and their underlying metrics have certainly not looked good. They played well, like I said, over the last 6 weeks, 13-4-2. But they've dropped off quite a bit here since January 11th. They ranked 30th in even strength expected goals percentage, 25th in shot attempt percentage. That's been kind of masked by a positive goal share. But yeah, they haven't been good on special teams either. 16.7% on the power play in January, and their penalty kill, while not terrible, it's looked worse than it has in any other month so far this season. So I thought -155 was a great price on Winnipeg. I think there was a little bit of hesitancy in the market to go after the Jets or push that line any higher because obviously Eric Comrie just ended an 8-game losing streak for himself with that 5-2 win over the Flames over the weekend. But Montreal has a rest advantage here. 1 day, they've had 2 days off versus just 1 day off for the Winnipeg Jets. But Hellebuck's been off since Friday, so he's actually rested more than the Canadians here. And I don't really think that was being taken into account necessarily earlier before the confirmation. But it looks like Hellebuck is going to start, considered likely right now, based on Daily Faceoff starting goalies page. So I'm on the Jets -155. I think you can still bet them at -160. I think that's a pretty reasonable price here. Winnipeg, obviously, they get a lot of Hellebuck gets a lot of credit for what Winnipeg's done this season, and rightfully so. He's a -3,000 favorite to win the Vezina Trophy right now, so pretty much a virtual lock. But Winnipeg's offense has been really good as well, right? They have the they're tied for first in goals per 60 minutes right now. So I think the offense has been just as important to the team's success, and they've posted the 3rd best expected goals percentage at even strength over the last month. And no team has a better goal differential at even strength. So just a lot to like here about Winnipeg, and I think they're catching Montreal at the right time. Montreal's played some pretty ugly games. Even some of the games they've won recently haven't been the prettiest. So I like this play. Looks like it is going to be Samuel Montembeault starting for the Canadians, and that follows Jacob Dobbs' first loss of the season, overtime loss. So he still hasn't lost in regulation, which is pretty impressive. But Montembeault, he's 17-17-3 this season, .899 save percentage, 2.99 goals against average, 3 shutouts, hasn't lost consecutive games in his last 13 starts. But he's just 1-3-1 versus the Jets in his career, and he's going to be outmatched in the crease versus Hellebuck tonight. So I think -160 or -155, -160, really reasonable price to get the Jets at. But That's moved up to minus 170 at some books. So definitely shop around here on the Winnipeg Jets money line.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I don't know if you saw like that meme that's like the guy on the left is like a schmucky looking kind of guy, and then the middle one is like a crying kind of nerdy guy, and then the one, I think it's pretty popular, and it was getting posted with Mahomes this week, just saying like just bet Mahomes, and I feel like that's kind of like the Hellebuck situation here, because you can come up with all these other reasons, but over the last 2 years, the Jets are 65-31 with Hellebuck straight up, and $100 better would be up $1,500 for 15.7% ROI in that span. So,
nice.
Yeah, definitely never a bad strategy to just bank on him and the Jets getting wins.
Oh, I know the meme you're talking about, like the bell curve. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah,
I feel like it's
I was
like
trying to visualize.
Yeah,
it.
I know. It was hard to describe for me there, but I feel like it would be fitting here.
It's like low IQ people and high IQ people both
agree that that's the play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then the people in the middle are like, but yeah. Anyway, that's a terrible explanation on our part. But,
so there's probably a small percent of you that understand what I'm trying to get at right now. But hopefully he comes through for you again here.
Anything else you like tonight, Nick?
I think that might have been it so far. I was actually waiting for Pinnacle to drop the props on the Caps game as I wait to do that one. That's probably the only other one I have. I did bet on the Ducks yesterday. The second I saw that they were playing Decord last night in Vancouver or in Edmonton, I felt like it was already a good spot, but they were plus 140, even as high as plus 145 yesterday, which is kind of insane. Now they're down to plus 110. So that's the only other one I'd note. It's that spot we see a lot where, if a team's going to confirm their starter one night and you have the ability to get some money down, obviously the limits are going to be lower. But once Seattle confirmed Decord last night, they're probably not playing him back-to-back in this game. And we've seen how much, obviously, the difference between Grubauer and Decord matters. And on top of that, I feel like plus 140 was already just a pretty long number. The Kraken have a really hard time scoring. I don't really need to oversell what the Ducks are, but they have, the league's best goaltending, arguably, between the two. Dostal's been unreal. So, yeah, I thought this was a pretty good price. And the Ducks haven't been, too pathetic lately, really. I feel like they've been somewhat close to the Kraken anyways. So, yeah, I thought that was a good bet, but kind of has swung past the point where I would play it.
Yeah, I bet on McDavid to score an anytime goal at plus 143 odds yesterday, so I was happy to get that. He had been on a bit of a scoring streak before his suspension, and with a weak Seattle team, I figured he'd be right back in the mix. Was hoping that Draisaitl will get over 1.5 points again. He got one, but didn't get the second, so I split those two bets. But let's talk about the Oilers just a little bit here before we wrap this thing up, because obviously they were a huge favorite. They were in the minus 300 range before we learned that Stuart Skinner would not be starting, and it would be Calvin Pickard in his place. And I think Picard's been pretty good this season, but obviously the betting market adjusted. Minus 265 is where the Oilers closed at. But man, you look at the game versus Buffalo, 41.63% expected goals percentage in all situations against the Sabres. That's not a good performance for a big favorite. And then you look at the Seattle game, 54% expected goals for Edmonton, which is obviously, decent, but, nowhere near what you want to see out of a minus 270 favorite, right? So I'm just a little bit worried about this Oilers team. And from a betting perspective, I've been relying on the player props all year long because I just don't see a lot of situations where I want to bet on the Oilers. Obviously, they're still rated as the best team in the NHL, arguably, but I don't think they are. I think that there's a drop off from last year, and that's a little bit crazy considering I do think their blue line is improved and whatnot, but they're just not. They're just not closing out games the way they should. They're not dominating the way they should based on their odds. And it worries me a little bit as far as a Stanley Cup run this year.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I feel like you've seen these kind of lulls from like all the top teams. So I don't know if they're quite in the point where I'd worry too much. We saw it from Winnipeg for a month there. I don't know if I think the Caps are like a true cup contender, but we just saw it for a month from them. So I feel like it does happen, but I see where you're coming from. You've been pretty
Well,
sharp on
this is
beating this.
all season though, where Edmonton really isn't closing out big games the way they should. They're not they're not winning. They're not covering the puck line. You know what I mean? They're not winning in regulation as much as you think they would. So that's what kind of bothers me. It's not necessarily just this little stretch of their underlying numbers, but I think it's the lack of the big scorers. We're not seeing them just hammer teams 8-3 and stuff like that like they did last season on a number of occasions. So maybe they'll pump it up down the stretch, but it's worrying me
It
as
seems like
as an
last night's
Edmontonian.
game script, and I have played against them in a couple first periods this year, but it felt like that was a really common game script. Like it seems like every time they play a Seattle or a Buffalo, the game's kind of tight. The other team hangs around for a little while there, and then the Oilers win by a goal or maybe two if they actually hit an empty net, which has been really rare. But we'll see. I'm really intrigued to see how the Klingberg thing works out, because obviously it's a huge get if he happens to come back and play at the level we've seen at times in his career. But I think it could be kind of a nightmare if he ends up, playing basically how he was prior to the surgery, and then they're kind of stuck trying to work him in, or they kind of try to live with it and insulate him or whatever it is. So I think that whole situation is definitely going to be something that's intriguing to watch ahead of the deadline here.
Yeah, the Oilers haven't been a great first period team. They rank totally average 16th in first period goals this season, and I think they're close to they're in the bottom 10 in first period goals against. So that has been a problem for Edmonton this
I
season.
wonder
I'd be
if part of
interested
that,
to know. Go
if you
ahead,
dove
sorry.
into it, would be that they just play the lines more evenly in the first period,
Yeah,
or maybe it comes down to randomness. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of it, because it feels like in the third period when the games are close, you just get McDavid or Draisaitl every shift, and then things are a little different.
yeah, no, for sure. They definitely do that sometimes, where or oftentimes actually, where if they are trailing, they load up that top line. But I'll have to look into it and find out just how much how many times they've had to come back from trailing in the first period and whatnot. Uh, so I think that would be something interesting to look into here. Trying to yeah, okay. So Edmonton, um, they have 9 wins this season after trailing in the first period. And yeah, I'll have to look into it a little bit more, but I do think that is there might be an angle there.
Yeah, I think the only one I want to touch on tomorrow, and maybe see what you thought too. The Flyers look kind of tempting to me in New Jersey. They're at plus 160 is the longest number I'm seeing right now.
Yeah.
And Jersey did not look good last night without Heischer. It definitely didn't help that Jake Allen was terrible, which maybe he's not going to be worse than Philly's goalies too often. But I feel like right now, like we've talked a lot about how the Flyers' underlying metrics are pretty solid. I think that they look pretty decent. And maybe if Allen kind of continues to struggle, I thought that number looked pretty long. I wouldn't be surprised to see the rematch tomorrow be pretty competitive.
Yeah, the Flyers 6-4 in the last 10 versus the Devils. They've won 3 straight versus New Jersey, and 4 of the last 5. So maybe a bit of a Achilles heel for this Devils team, especially with their goaltending issues right now.
Yeah, and
To the end of
Hughes
this
is
one.
playing through something. I didn't think he was overly bad last night, but I feel like if you're going to take out Heischer, who's been unreal at both ends of the ice, and not have Hughes play at that high of a level, no Jacob Markstrom, yeah, I feel like the more I look at it, I kind of think that could be the one to lock in early now.
I think I'm on the same page with you. Haven't had a chance to look into tomorrow's games yet, but first blush, Flyers are nothing for me.
Yeah, I think that was the only one. I was kind of hoping to bet the under in the Wild Leafs game. I could see that being a good spot for Mini to come in there and play a sharper defensive game, but a lot more obvious than I had thought because it's set at 5.5. So, uh, yeah, I don't know what I'll end up on for that one, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will see when we're back here on the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of the Puck Portfolio. But until then, good luck with your bets and gamble responsibly.